Welcome to Divorce Decoded. I have today Mark Banschick, the author of The Intelligent Divorce, Taking Care of Your Children, and also Taking Care of Yourself, and hopefully more to come.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Isaac. Really, thank you for having me. I'm Mark Banschick. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. And I got to this divorce area because I was an expert witness in court. What is an expert witness in court? Well, a judge sometimes has to decide who is going to have custody of a child and when a child can go to a particular person's house. And that's a hard thing for a judge to decide. So sometimes they turn to people like me, a child psychiatrist, to look at everybody, interview the children, interview the parents, look at the big situation, come to court and tell the judge, this is what I think should happen under the circumstances.
And what happened from being an expert witness?
Right.
Do you call it expert witness or like forensic and that? Like,
It's a forensic evaluator, but I was an expert witness in court. They seen me as an expert witness.
so it would be one of the parties hiring you or both together?
I would never take a case unless I was appointed by a judge and I was paid by both parents up front. I want to be completely impartial. I'm not interested in being a hired gun for anybody. That's not why I was put on this earth.
That's very interesting because, like, we would think of that less as an expert witness, more as a forensic analysis, which the court is going to use. How do you? But you see it more as expert witness.
Well, I see myself as an expert who's doing a forensic analysis. Because I'm a child psychiatrist and I understand child development and I understand what happens to children at each stage, whether they're 2 or 4 or 10 or 15 or 20. And there are adult children sometimes involved in divorce. You could be 50 years old, your parents are 75, and it still affects you. So that I don't have to go to court for that. But as long as the child is under the age of 18, the court's interested in making good decisions about custody. And so I got involved. So as you can tell by my personality and also by what I'm saying, I'm not interested in taking one side. I'm not pro-father. I'm not pro-mother. And in today's day and age, I'm not pro-partner, okay? I'm pro-child. Now, after doing many evaluations, I got annoyed. I felt the entire system was stacked against children. Lawyers were making a lot of money. Judges were overwhelmed. These are impossible questions for judges. And the children had to bear through all this. The grown-ups just couldn't provide the innocence that they require. And so I said to myself, there must be rules for divorce. There must be principles that we can teach that can help people actually divorce while protecting the innocence of their children. And that's what led me to stop being a forensic evaluator and to start writing books and writing for Psychology Today and reaching out to people like people in your audience about how to divorce better.
What you said about like children, older children, I've seen that with couples that I've mediated and seeing their children, not obviously I don't interact with their children, but seeing how their children come up and how even their children can't process it. They could be older than me. It for sure takes a toll on the child. Is it the process or is it like going to court and all that you felt was the issue, or was it more just the dynamic of divorce?
I think it's the dynamic of divorce. I think that families that can handle divorce in an organically correct way, I think many of their kids can come out just fine. So I want the audience to understand, really, we're talking 70% of these kids can come out just fine. They may have minor damage. Maybe when they start dating in the future, they might feel some reactive attachment issues. They get close to somebody, then they get scared because they lost their family of origin to divorce in the way that was constructed originally. That happens, but those are the more minor things. A good 60, 70, even 80% of kids come out of divorce okay, as long as parents handle the divorce intelligently. And that's what my books are about. It's called The Intelligent Divorce.
So is it the going through the divorce in court or doing it the wrong way that's really having that negative effect on the children?
Look, sometimes you have to go to court. You have an ex that's exploiting you. You have an ex that's mishandling the children. You have monies that have been sequestered illegally. I mean, there are reasons to go to court. You're scared. There's been violence. Your husband's knocking on the door when it's not his time to come, and you're feeling threatened. This is my house. You're not allowed here. A judge does need sometimes to say there's going to be an order of protection. You cannot show up. It's important to have these limits. It's important to have courts and laws to do the things they need to do. But we have to protect the innocence of children. So I think what we should segue is to discuss what the principles are that are so important to give kids a chance.
Right. I think it was the first chapter, second chapter of your book where you did it very nicely with the
Oh,
stories.
thank you.
So you have one story of a couple that is navigating a low conflict divorce, but there's some things that are said that the child overhears and the effect that that has versus another couple which had a very contentious divorce, but they were able to separate between court
Yes.
and at their house, and that had a lesser effect on the children than the more quote unquote peaceful divorce.
Look, Isaac, it's such a terrible irony. When you're going through divorce, you're feeling badly. You are not at your best. You're grieving. We'll talk about that momentarily. You're grieving. You're overwhelmed. You're looking at your friends who are married and you feel like, what happened to me? You're worried about money. Unconsciously, you're even worried, will anybody ever love me again? It's heavy. And in that very moment, this is the way it's created. I mean, you're a religious guy. It's the way God did it. You have to be a better parent. You have to be a better parent at the very moment when you can't be. And that's what I'm trying to teach in the Intelligent Divorce. It's like, listen, guys, I know you're going through a hard time. Let's own it. Let's really own it. It's okay. But now we've got to step up because the kids need you. And here are the rules.
So something that you did very nicely, you brought the Bill of Rights of Children, which there's a Bill of Rights on the court website also. So it's like, you want to know what you really should be doing, there is this Bill of Rights. And I think it's a very interesting approach. It's really the divorce approach where you have a marriage that doesn't work out. So let's make a divorce agreement with rules. And now things are going to work out because you have to follow the rules. You didn't pay the mortgage, but now there's child support. Now there's alimony. There's no actions. There's more responsibilities that could be measured and quantified. And in parenting as well, which this is not necessarily the parenting in parenting themselves, right? It could be the parents worked out prior, but now in divorce, there are certain rules that I'm going to use the rules that you put together.
Yes.
Let's use those. Let's go through them and really what is, and I like this for another reason. It makes this dogma of like, this is what you got to do. You don't have to explain it because, listen, these are the rules that are out there, court website, out there in different versions, but let's go through these.
And these are the rules that really help kids because we know, we've looked at the research. We know that many kids come out of divorce okay. We know that there's a large subset of kids who do not come out okay. And most of those kids have struggled with parents who really are breaking these rules, that are destroying the child's innocence, that are sharing too much, that where the kid experiences where they have to choose between one parent and another. And years pass, and you're okay. I'm talking about the parents. And you're okay. Years have passed, and you forget what you said to your kid. On that day that you were depressed and you sat down on the couch next to your kid and you say to your like 12-year-old son, I'm so depressed. Your father is such a jerk. We do these things, but we shouldn't do these things because years later, you're remarried or you're on to your life or you're enjoying yourself. And years later, he's 25 years old. And he says to his therapist, my mom sat down with me one day and she just dumped all over me. And I had to carry this. That I'm taking care of her. Like, why should I have to take care of my mother? And so I'm just Breathe deep, okay? I'm a child psychiatrist, an adult psychiatrist. I know the way things work. I do. And these kids need their innocence. They need their childhood. And even though you're having a rough time, breathe deep, go to a therapist, get what you need, talk to a friend, talk to your mom, do whatever you need. But don't share things you shouldn't share, and pay attention to the Bill of Rights. So I'll go through each one if you'd like,
Yeah.
and maybe we can discuss it. Okay?
Let's read them over. I think they really capture, trying to give the child a carefree childhood to some extent. And also the intergenerational boundaries and stuff
Okay.
like that.
Okay. So I think that there are two principles I'd like to lay out. Three principles I'd like to lay out for you. One principle is the intergenerational boundary. There is a boundary between grown-ups and children. Okay? Grown-ups are grown-ups, children are children. And there's a thick line between the two of them. Now, children by nature are going to try to break the boundary. They negotiate with you. They're little lawyers. They want to get, whatever they can get from you. Can I be on the computer more? Come on, you said. No, the time is up. You have to go to bed now. Okay? Intergenerational boundaries. Parents break intergenerational boundaries all the time in divorce, not by allowing kids to come up, but going down to them. Like the woman I talked about who talked to her son, about her depression when she really shouldn't. Okay? Kids need their innocence. That's the second one. So the intergenerational boundaries are there for what reason? To provide children with innocence. Children require innocence. This is the gift. You're a father. The audience out there that's listening are parents. Kids need their innocence. It's the biggest thing we can give to children. The world is filled with terrible things to inflict on our kids, whatever it is, ideas, sexuality, violence, confusing messages. We have responsibility until they're a certain age to give them an innocent life where they can just be kids and not have to worry about the outside. And parents have to protect that boundary, protecting the intergenerational boundary and protecting the kids from the outside world. And a conversation for another time about the internet. And the final principle that I really want to discuss before we get to this is the idea of regression. Are you familiar with the idea of regression?
Yes. I'll share with you. I was by a Nefesh conference and there was several therapists. They were all telling me what you're doing, it's very nice and all, but the parents are in a regressed state at this point. And I was like, well, that's exactly the point. If they're in a regressed state, what do you do when your two children are fighting? You tell them, go get a lawyer, go speak to your friends, go do that. Or do you sit them down in their bedroom, on their bed, and what is your goal? What do you want to happen? You want them to be able to run off and play together or not play together, but to get over this hurdle that we're in right now that we could progress onwards. You want them to talk to each other. That's how you're going to solve a fight for children.
Right.
If they're in a regress state, that's what we should be doing.
Okay, so this is a really important part of understanding divorce. Divorce is a time-limited situation. It's what we call in psychology a liminal moment. It's when you're between states. You're married, you're getting divorced, and one day you're kind of no longer married. It's kind of a period. 6 months, a year, 5 years. Some people, they're getting divorced forever. During the time of people getting divorced, there's anxiety. There's anxiety in the system. What the anxiety does is it depresses functioning. People drop down in functioning from higher levels to lower levels. So people that are a little selfish become narcissistic. People who have an angry streak become more violent. People who are a little needy become dependent. People who are complainers, go to the court and become victims. It's endless what happens to the regression. But these regressions need to be understood for what they are, because you may be dealing with an ex who's very narcissistic and let's say is taking money from you in ways that he never would have done before. So instead of getting outraged about it and going to your lawyer and turning it into, You set limits, you get a forensic accountant, you make sure the guy doesn't get away with it, you trust but verify, and you don't turn it into a big thing. You just make sure that you're safe. In terms of the children, when you're dealing with regression, both your spouse's regression and your own regression, it's about regulation. It's about regulating yourself and regulating him or her. When you regulate yourself, you're able then to do these rules we're about to say, because the kids need to see that you're the parent, intergenerational boundaries, and they're the kids. And what your audience is beginning to see is that I kind of put together a comprehensive system, a kind of really comprehensive framework to think about divorce, from the very easiest divorces to the very, very terrible divorces when the regression is into like a malignant narcissist, where you really just need an order of protection and have very limited contact with that person. So let's go through the Child's Bill of Rights, okay? I'll read it right out of my book, or would you like to read it?
You do the first one.
Okay. Don't ask me to choose sides. Now, Isaac, why would it be a problem to ask a child to choose sides?
I think it's actually deeper than just the problem. I think it's even shooting yourself in the leg, because you're diminishing this parent role and you're putting the child in between. You're making them choose sides, right? You're making them decide which way to go. Or now you're both pulling at the child.
So I think that that's really important. Remember, this child has you as a mother, or you as a father, and him as a father, right? Her as a mother. Okay? He's half you. He's half your spouse. When you're asking him to choose sides, you're splitting him inside himself. You're splitting her apart inside herself. She wants to love both of you. And just because your ego is in such a damaged way that you need her to know, your daughter, that your ex-husband was a jerk, she may decide in the long run that he's not a jerk. He was just a jerk to you. And give her that opportunity. Don't lead the witness. And so, yes, it's very damaging when you're asking your child to choose.
Let's go to the second one. Spare the details of legal proceedings.
Why is that an issue? Spare me the details of the legal proceeding. Why would a kid be saying that to me in a session?
Based on the agreement, I'm supposed to go to my mom.
Don't confide in me or lean on me. It's too much. So this is really the breaking of the intergenerational boundary. And this is similar to don't share with me the legal proceedings. It's like you come home from a legal proceeding, okay, and you got stung. Okay, you got stung. It didn't work out. And you're pissed or you're annoyed. And you kind of share with your kid, like in passing. I can't believe what happened in court today with your father, with your mother, whatever. You don't know what we're going through. And breaking the intergenerational
This is
boundary.
almost even like parentification, where you're like turning the child into the parent.
You're encouraging the child to be what we call a parentified child. So now I hope your audience can handle all these concepts, but they can read my book. It's not that complicated, really. There is a concept in psychology called the parentified child, a child who is no longer living in the child generation. The child has now gone up to the parent generation. If anything, the parents are now in the child generation. This child is hearing about the legal proceedings, is being asked to choose sides, is being confided in, and they want to survive. So they look at their mother or their father and they say, this is trouble. I think I have to take care of her. I have to take care of him. Why? I have to take care of her so she can take care of me. I have to take care of him so I'll be okay. That's a lot of pressure. By the way, some of those people become therapists. But it is a damaging thing to do. And kids will survive. They're very smart. But they should never be asked to have to take care of their parent in order to be taken care of by them.
When I hear parents talk about their child, she's 6 going on 16, I'm like, red flag, like she should have a childhood. She should be able to be 6. Why is she 16?
So I think, once again, the principles I'm trying to lay out for the public is the innocence of the child is really important. And if she's saying to you, and we want to be curious, we're not blaming her. She's 6 going on 16. The question is, where is her innocence? And what's going on? Probably what's going on is she's overexposed to the world, or she has too much power in the house and needs to stay a kid. Here's the next one. Give me privacy on the phone with my other parent, and I'll give the next one in fact. Don't cross-examine me afterwards. You've heard this before, right?
Yes, I've heard this a lot. I heard it recently. There was someone that the children were telling the parent who was by that other parent's house, and then the investigation and trying to find out and dig into it, and it's really you need to leave space, you need to move on, you need to, when we're stuck in the down low, we can't go up, and there's so much more up than down.
It's divorce is hard sometimes. I don't blame them. You're concerned that you're sending your daughter to their father and he has a woman there that you don't approve of. You're concerned that your son is visiting his mother and she's not giving him the medication he's supposed to have. And so you're worried. And you hear them talking on the phone and you're listening carefully, and then you're cross-examining because you want the information. But what does that do to the kid?
And it also has a negative effect on your situation itself. Because if, let's say, you're introducing a new spouse to your children, right? The normal thing would be to inform your
Yes.
ex first.
Yes.
Now, if you're prying and you're always sabotaging relationships, your ex can't communicate with you. You're breaking down that communication that you could have when you're going through the child, because now you're making this whole blended family that much more complicated and difficult.
Right. Well, you're certainly not communicating with your ex. And look, some exes
Where you could have, I think
Yes.
a lot of these
Yes.
cases, they could have have you not brought the child into it. But once you bring the child in, the child's going back and forth. It's like therapy sessions are limited, right? Most people would not have a therapy session each day. Mediations, I limit the sessions whenever possible. They should not be within a week of each other because it's too much. But if you're having that go in between, always by one of you, passing back and forth messages,
Yes.
you're living in that. And that's too much.
And that's the next one, which is, I am not your messenger. And this is, look, we have malignant divorces, okay? You can find me through Psychology Today. I've had like 16 million people read my stuff. You can get my books through Psychology Today. You can email me through Psychology Today. I have articles about the malignant divorce. I even have an article called Divorce Island, which is the idea that when people get divorced, it's almost like they're on an island where the rules are different. And I'm telling you what I think the rules are. And sometimes you have a spouse, an ex-spouse, who really isn't like your wife or isn't like your husband. She's so regressed and so angry or so hurt or so victimized or so legalistic that you just can't believe you were married to this person, but you are. But I do believe that if we give people the rules, there's a nice percentage of people who are kind of going off the cliff that don't have to. Like if you don't cross-examine the kid when they're on the phone with their parent, when you don't use your kid as a messenger, when you say to yourself, you're just about to tell your kid how upset you are about something in court, and you go, Dr. Banschick said I shouldn't do this. He's right. I'm going to call my mother. Okay? We've done a good deed in this world, and we've saved the kid pain. The best mistake is what? The best mistake is the one you don't make. Okay.
I had a older person, 50 something, and she told me she's still trying to figure out. She knew that her father was responsible for 66% of her tuition, and her mother was responsible for 33%, and all other expenses for the school, all the ancillary, if let's say she was going on a trip. But who paid that 1%? That's the question she still has today
Mm,
because she had to collect that money from each of them.
mm.
And she's still trying to figure out her childhood. But really, like, why is she?
Why was she exposed to this?
These are
You know?
educated people. Both her parents are
Well,
educated.
they thought they were doing the right thing by sharing with her the truth.
She should know finance.
You know? So this is another thing. This is a weak thing parents do. They can't help it. I'm not. Please. I'm not criticizing people. They say when in doubt, tell the truth. You know what? When in doubt, you can defer the truth. You know that issue about how much you paid. Maybe can wait till she's 26 years old. Maybe when she's 26, she can know. And maybe if you didn't have sex with your wife for 5, 10 years, maybe she should never know that. Okay. And maybe if you were seeing somebody, your mother and your wife was anxious about it, her mother was anxious about it. Maybe when your daughter is 40 years old and you're in the car talking, you're having a nice walk. Look, I must admit, I made a mistake, but you're old enough to understand. And we can decide when we tell the truth, not just if we tell the truth.
Right. Okay. The next one.
Don't ever ask me to lie to one of my parents.
This is something that's coming up much more now. Just the concept of secrets and lying, just because of the rise of people being aware of
Abuse,
different things that are happening, and it's it's for sure important when you're talking about co-parents.
Yes.
You are parenting this child together, and you're going to have secrets from one another. That's
intergenerational boundaries being destroyed. Innocence is being destroyed. You're creating
safety.
Safety is being controlled.
And these are children that if parents are single parent children, are children that are targeted. This is where you need more
support.
Yeah.
If you're a parent asking your child to lie to the other parent, you're in trouble. Your child's in trouble and you're in trouble. You should get help right away. Because it means you're holding back something that is damning and can hurt the child. It could either hurt the child physically or psychologically or sexually, but you should get the help you need right now. That is a tell. You know what a tell is in poker?
No.
A tell in poker, if you're doing poker with somebody playing a game, playing a hand, and somebody like lifts their eyebrow, you know that they have a good hand. Like they have a physical thing they do that's a tell that tells you that you're going to fold because they've got a good hand. They made a mistake because their body language shared something they didn't want to share. A tell in our business is you're asking your child to tell a secret, not to tell a secret. Excuse me. That's a tell. That means you're in big trouble. Now let's go into that a little more deeply because I think it's important. Yes, there's a tremendous amount of abuse, and probably like 25% to 30% of divorces are initiated with some claim of abuse, sexual or verbal, mostly more verbal or physical. But people also live secret lives, and particularly people who are on a narcissistic spectrum. As you know, I'm writing another book on narcissism right now, so it's worth discussing. There are people in this world who are able to compartmentalize one life and another life. And you should understand that this is something everybody does. Like if you're on a diet and you go to the refrigerator to get celery and you put your hand into the refrigerator and you find your hand into the freezer, you get the ice cream and you don't tell anybody, that's a secret life. Like you're on a diet, nobody knows, and you're eating ice cream. Okay? But there are much more malignant secret lives, like taking money and putting it into a private bank account, like seeing prostitutes and, putting everyone at risk, like having an affair, like even, having a girlfriend over before the child's really ready to meet somebody, or a boyfriend over before the child ready. These are secret lives. And if you're doing it and the child catches you and you're telling your child not to say anything, you should get help right away because this kid's in trouble.
I would say that the other side of it is, if these things do come up, and hopefully the parent does the right thing by not telling the child not to tell on them.
Right.
Um, an important thing to know is the idea of cognitive dissonance, where you could separate two truths. You could have, and in divorce especially, like you have the truth of they were a terrible spouse, but they could be a great parent. That
Absolutely.
And when such a thing comes up, okay, so the child saw this. Now what do we do? And what I always advise my clients when I leave off with them, I'm not a big fan of parent coordinators whenever possible. Nobody's going to be able to send the text, you're coming late. These things can happen. So as long as you cannot deal with things in the moment, and the moment is just to pass the moment,
Hmm.
and then you'll have a running list, you'll come back to mediation, you'll deal with it with a therapist, and you'll be open to working it through, then you could get through the problems. The problem really is when someone's not open
Right.
to working it out.
Well,
So
when you have
something comes up,
Right.
right? The child saw that what was introduced to the
There's a girlfriend over at the
girlfriend
house, and
before.
it's really premature, but it's what you did, and you're saying to yourself, "Damn it, why can't I have this girl over? I've been out of the house for 3 months. What's the big deal?"
So that if they're open to having the conversation now, hopefully the conversation will be able to resolve it
Right.
in a proper setting. I don't necessarily think that people could always do it on their own once it
They
reaches
might need
that
some
point.
help,
But you could, with a little bit of help, this is
it's
outside
not.
of court. This could be by a
Yes.
therapist of your choosing, not
You have a therapist. You're with your ex-wife, your soon-to-be ex-wife. Look, I'm dating somebody. What I did probably wasn't right. Sandy, our kid, wasn't really ready to meet her. I kind of said to myself, "What's the big deal?" But now looking back on it, I'm recommitting myself to not introducing Sandy to anybody unless I'm really serious, and I really apologize. Now, your ex may get angry, but that's like doing a lot towards repairing something that's damaged.
right. Listen to me when I have something to say.
Why do you think that's there?
I think that parents going through divorce sometimes get so what's the right word? So
Self-preoccupied.
yeah, that's a great word. Self-preoccupied with their divorce that they can't hear what the child is saying, as well as
Yes.
if a child says that they don't want to go to a parent, right? Listen to them. You don't need to ask. You don't need to. If you just listen, you're going to get a lot of the answers. In negotiation, one of the key things that good negotiators do is just listen. That's all you have to do is listen.
Grief. Okay. Do you know what grief is, Isaac?
I've had some grief.
Mhm. So, what is the process of grief?
There's the first step of denial. Then there's negotiate.
We don't have to go through Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but just like grief is a natural human phenomenon. You have a loss. A parent dies. A spouse dies. I just lost my dog. 15 years. I miss my dog very much. Not the same as a parent or a spouse, but it's still a loss. You lose a job. You get divorced. You have a loss. And when you have a loss, it takes a long time to process it through. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross went over the rules, which I don't want to repeat on the podcast. But the idea is that you need to process it, which includes a lot of unhappy feelings. Sometimes you're blaming yourself. Sometimes you're blaming your ex. Sometimes you're blaming God. Sometimes you're just feeling depressed. But sometimes you're fine, and then all of a sudden it hits you like a tidal wave. And then you're fine again. It hits you again like a tidal wave. And man, it's just like hard. And it takes time. And then you're going through a divorce with somebody, and they're taking you to court, and they get a letter from a lawyer, and then you have to respond, and you're looking at your bank account, and how can you afford this? And you're worried about your kids. And it's like, how do you grieve when the wound keeps getting opened up again? It's like one thing, if I've lost both my parents, and I love them, and I miss them, they were great. but they were good parents and I miss them and I grieved. It's okay. But divorce is like, it can be a very difficult grief. And when you're grieving, how can I put this? If you bang your toe hard before we started this podcast, how much can you pay attention to me? I'm asking Isaac.
Oh, I don't know how to quantify that. But I get what you're saying, and I think you said it differently to me a different time. As in divorce, it's always a moving target. It's like today, it's just about moving out, and then tomorrow, then the selling of the house. Could I move out of the state?
Right.
Could we?
Right. Endless requirements, endless disappointments, endless. You're feeling fine, and boom, you get hit from the side. I got to do this. This is going to cost me. This is going to cost me. My kid is not sleeping at night. My 7-year-old is wetting the bed again. What's going on? Okay. When you hit your toe hard before somebody walks in the room, paying attention to the pain of your toe. And so when you're going through a divorce that's contentious or sad, you're in grief, it's hard. You're in that pain. It's hard to pay attention to your children. And that's what I said in the beginning of this podcast. It's like it's such an irony, but I'm saying it with a loving smile. It's like, we can do this. Yes, we feel like crap. Yes, it is. There's no sugarcoating this. But you will get to the other side. 5 years from now, you're going to be on your way. Right now, you have to stand up to a higher level of parenting. And so if your kid needs to talk to you about anything, she just wants you to read her a book. He just wants to go to a movie. He needs to see, I don't know, Harry Potter for the 13th time. Just like say, okay, that's cool. And get over yourself.
And a lot of people really live up to the challenge in shocking ways. I find myself as a parent learning from my clients how much they step up.
That makes
and
me
how
so
much,
happy. Yes.
How much people really are there for their children and make the time. People that wouldn't have otherwise. But now it's the time for the children. You have to, there's a term, reborn again dad.
Yes.
So there's
born again dad.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that happens a lot. All of a sudden you realize that you can't just live through your
conversation. I love this conversation. But here you have a father, let's say, who was preoccupied with his business, whatever. You're getting a divorce. And did you know the majority of divorces are initiated by women?
Yes.
It is. It's like 2/3.
I'll tell you where I see it change is second marriages. From my clientele, I see it more the men. I don't. It's for sure not 70%, 69% what they say for first time divorces.
Right.
Second time or older divorces a lot of times.
Right. So women oftentimes initiate a divorce, and that's and then the man all of a sudden may say to himself, he looks at these 3 kids and goes, I can't believe I have these beautiful children. And this divorce is going to be a mess. And I'm going to lose some money and it's not right. And, I worked and she didn't, or whatever, she worked night, whatever it is. But this precious cargo, it's precious. And I'm going to put the time in. And I've seen many parents, I've seen this many times, of people who've actually stepped up in their character functioning. Not just stepped down, stepped up in the character functioning and are there for their kids and parent their kids in ways that they were never parented before. And ironically, sometimes divorce happens because you were trained by your own father about how to deal with a marriage. You had a distant father yourself. I'm talking about the male identification for the moment. And, and then your wife over the years says to herself, this is a deprivation for me. And she plans to leave, and she does. And then you wake up and you say to yourself, this doesn't happen often, always. This doesn't happen always, but when it happens, it's beautiful. When you realize, I deprived my wife in the same way that my father deprived my mother, but it's a different generation. She's not putting up with it, and I'm going to grow from this. And you give to your kids, and nothing is the same again. These kids benefit from it. 20 years from now, they're grateful.
No guilt tripping no matter what. What does that mean?
It gets back to the issue about how much you're going through and what you're doing. It's so easy to say to yourself and say to the kids, look what I'm doing for you. Look what I'm putting up for you. Look how much I sacrifice for you. Now, normal parents do that to children, okay? But divorcing parents under a lot of stress can do that even more.
I'm gonna miss you if you don't come for whatever. I really missed you on this vacation. Or it would be so nice if you only.
Why don't you call more often? Why don't you come more often? I really feel sad when you don't call.
Well, let me tell you something. I wonder your take on this. I did a podcast with Lindsay Morris from my extended family, and she said that in their data, the most often, and they offer a plan because of this, most often when one parent is calling the other parent, the child, they're calling twice a week for 5 minutes. So they have like this 45-minute package. Now, in divorce agreements, when people put in times for calls, what I've seen most often was 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at that. Wait, okay, so that's what's happening. And I started to tell clients when we talk about the phone call is like, just know what to expect. Like, if your child's not talking to you for 15 minutes, just know, like, this is what the average is.
Right.
But going back to guilt tripping,
I'm calling. Why aren't you talking to me? The thing I like about calls, I want to say about calls. There's a big clock in London. It's called Big Ben. Okay? Everybody knows when Big Ben goes off. Okay, because it goes off. That's the way I like calls. I like it. It's 3:00 on Wednesday afternoon. You know, that call is like clockwork. The kid doesn't have to even think. He knows 3:00 on Monday. He may not want to talk to his father. He may want to talk to his father. He may find it annoying, but he knows at 3:00, like clockwork, bring. That's meaningful because some things are bigger than the experience itself. The structure of that kid knowing that your parent cares enough that whatever, he can be in Thailand on a business trip. He can be in the middle of a huge business meeting. He says to everybody, you know what? In 5 minutes, I have to make a call. It's going to be 15 minutes. I'm sorry. It's an obligation to myself. That means a lot.
And on the other side of it, what's going on in the house, like if the call is coming during supper, or if the call is, and especially now with the video calls, I've had a few parents that they're geographically, they can't have as much visitation.
I understand.
And they do video calls. But one of the parents might have an issue with that. Well, I don't need my ex-spouse seeing my kitchen table.
Yes.
I don't need them to. So what they did was they had a stationary computer. And if you do that, I do think that there's also this element where you have to have a structure. You're not going to call in.
Right. It's a magical space, a special space and space and time where everybody shows up. It's like, and it has this quality of Big Ben that's so reassuring, structurally reassuring. And she's right. We're saying the mother's the person in the house for the moment. She's right. Like, for him to call on video call and the child's at the dining room table and her kitchen is being exposed to her ex, is an invasion of privacy. I get that. But they can negotiate it so that there's a stable computer in a room where there's no problem. And then at 3:00, that call, or 7:00, whatever it is, it's like clockwork. It's very reassuring. And it shows their two parents working together, which comes around to Constance Aaron's very important another idea of the binuclear family. The binuclear family. Have you heard that term before?
I have not.
It's a great term.
What does it mean?
The binuclear family is the idea that when you have a nuclear family, it's like you and your wife, or if it's a gay couple, two partners together, and that's the family. In a divorce situation, you have a nucleus here that's the mother and the children, and a nucleus here that's the father and the children. But the family gets along, so there's a certain kind of circle that embraces both. that we are a family still. We're a binuclear family. And I have supervised and therapized and worked with so many people to create the binuclear family, which I think gives the child a sense that there's a future, there's hope, and it's really okay. And it's like there's a lot of love to go around. And so this is a perfect example we had before about binuclear, because if he's doing a video call and she doesn't want her kitchen exposed, and he goes, I get it. Let's do it in another room. That's the binuclear family working, and the kids do well.
Right. I think as we change, meaning in 1950, visitation was dad gets Sundays. That was visitation for
Right.
everyone.
Right.
But the more we're progressing in
Right.
giving
Father's rights.
father's rights,
Of course.
more of a and seeing it that's a better
And parental rights. Sometimes the father is a better parent, or the more reliable parent. We have a much more how can you say it, empirical approach. Like what's going to work for the child is much more important now than some kind of ideological
well
approach.
for the family also, because more traditionally people would do it still not every Sunday, but they would be splitting, let's say, family time,
Right.
weekends, holidays,
Right.
vacation,
Mhm.
and maybe less time during the week, not having like a 50-50 type of
Right,
idea,
right.
right? But as we're giving more time and we're building more of a family, when you have to communicate about anything, the kid needs stitches, right?
Right.
What happens then? Wait, why did you let her go on the swing set? What happened? How did this happen? Or is it, okay, let's get to the hospital. Let's figure out who the best person to do stitches is. Let's figure out how we're going to go about it.
Right. Taking the anxiety out of the system.
Yeah, because I had someone recently, the kid got hurt in school. And I was
know.
like,
I know.
wow, at least it was in the school.
Right.
If it was by one of the parents' house and we were in the middle of negotiating, just why did it have to happen?
The thing,
But it was in school. So I was
we
like,
talked about this
okay.
before the podcast. It's like, it's almost like there's a tribunal in the sky that everyone is like turning towards. I'm being very psychological for everybody here. Okay. But it's like this big guy in the sky with a beard, or big mommy in the sky with a beard, with not a beard, obviously, with an apron, whatever. And, that is judging you and is going to say, yes, you were screwed and you did screwing. Yes, you were mistreated and you were the one who mistreated. And it's like, there is nobody that can say that. There is no tribunal. It's like we have to grieve and get over it and then see what we can do to work to make it better. And yeah, some people are better parents than other people. But that doesn't mean that they don't get 50% with the kid. They're not worse, like in the bottom 10% where they're letting terrible things happen. They're a little more loosey-goosey, and things sometimes happen, and you're a little bit more controlling and a little bit more careful, and things don't happen so much with you. But she's still a great parent, or he's still a great parent, and we're going to have to get over it and work with it. So if the kid gets hurt, you do want to point fingers, but you know what's better? Let's just fix it and maybe learn from it. One thing I do suggest to people is to consider, when you finished with your time with the kid, that you have a book, like just a notebook that you pass back and forth. Like, what happened today? What happened? I had him for the weekend. This is the medicine he got. He had no side effects on it. We went out to so-and-so's house. There was a problem here. I think George bullied him a little bit. He might have some feelings about it. And that's it. And you hand the book over to her when you do the transition. And I think that kind of thing is also like the Big Ben. It's like a physical thing that shows the kid that we have a binuclear family.
And you could do it on technology nowadays where you're sharing a doc or something. It doesn't even have to be a book that you're passing.
Exactly. I think but once again, the child knows that the parents are working together through difference.
Right.
America, listen, we can talk through difference. Okay? We don't always have to agree with each other to get along with each other. And in divorce, you have to be able to talk through difference.
I think it's really the transition of the idea of two ideas, respecting each other's ideas versus litigating right and wrong.
Right.
It's litigation world. And in the litigation world, some people are upset at the court system or arbitration systems. They're upset at it because, wait, why is it But no, you went into litigation. You went there for litigation.
Right. You see
How are they supposed to
what
give you?
happens, and we're going to get to the last one, but it's like litigation, and obviously there's room for litigation. You have a spouse that's dangerous. You have a spouse that's unreliable. You have a spouse that just won't settle. You have a spouse that has a mean streak. You have a spouse that has a blind spot about parenting. You have abuse concerns. There's reasons. But once you go to litigation, the likelihood of people regressing even further and getting more entrenched in their anger and victimhood and using the law as a weapon against the other person, and like once again trying to go to the sky and saying, "I'm right, judge, I'm right, prove to the world that I'm right." In the end, you're spending a lot of money. Occasionally it works out, but a lot of damage is done, and very often the collateral damage is who?
Children.
Exactly. Last one. Let's do the last one before we wrap up.
Don't spoil me, even if you feel guilty. So you're against the Disney parent.
Well, why don't you go over with me? You have a lot of experience. Why is it that somebody would spoil a child when they feel guilty?
It's something that they could give, which is interesting because I always tell parents there's 2 Hanukkah presents, there's 2 Christmas gifts. You're not sharing that. We're not splitting that. And I tell them also like the tip for the teachers, give double. But
That's nice.
I think
That's very nice.
and I think that there are things that have to
See,
come
what
with
I like
divorce.
about you, let me just say this. I love your presentation. I'm sure what you do with your clients is great, but there's love behind you. Like you really, like you don't love your clients, but you have love for the process of giving kids a chance. And I appreciate that in you.
I have it very easy because the clients that are coming to me are generally really good people. Like they understand we're in a bad situation and they got the memo, right? Now it's just helping them from there. Whereas people that are dealing with children that are being litigated in court, they have it much harder.
Yeah, I do want to say, because your mediation in the litigation world, you still can be a good parent and stable in a litigation situation with a narcissistic or sociopathic or borderline, or some parent that's very, very, or drug abusing, or somebody who has severe dysregulation issues. You don't have to let them dictate to you how you're going to behave. I've always have felt that divorce has taught me this personally. It's like, I don't want the other guy writing my role for me. Okay? Just because I'm going to pick on the woman for now. Just because she's so angry and makes me want to yell, and then she goes, "You see, I caught you on tape yelling." Just because she's good at doing that doesn't mean I have to play that role. I should choose the other one. He's banging on the door and it's not his visitation time, but he desperately wants to see his kid. "Can't I just see George? Can't I just see George?" And you're being violated. You don't have to yell and scream. You can say to him, "Listen, Larry," I'm calling him Larry. "Listen, Larry, what you're doing is not productive. I will call the police if you don't leave. I know you're upset, but I have to see him. I have to see him. I miss him so much. It's not helpful. I will call the police if I have to." Now, 5 times out of 10, Larry will wake up, get less regressed, come back to center, and leave. And 5 times out of 10, you have to call the police. But at least you didn't do what he programmed you to do. You handled it in a way that gave the whole situation a chance to de-escalate. And I think that that's remarkably possible.
I think that example that you gave with my clients, I use that example. But I would tell them, if he's knocking on the door and it's just a matter in the moment, don't make a scene out of it. If he will come back and sit down and be able to work things out in the moment, unless there's something you're really scared of, let the moment pass and deal with it afterwards. Whereas if someone's in court or there's litigation, it might not be the best.
Yeah, well, I would advise her to have a therapist, Because if he's knocking on the door, insists on coming in, and you allow him in, you are colluding with his regression and his dysregulation, which would encourage him to do it again.
So you're saying it would be done again.
So you really have to have a good therapist and understand that this is going to de-escalate very quickly, but we are in therapy and we're going to address this, and it's not going to ever happen again. I mean, I don't have an opinion. This would be something that you'd work out with your therapist. But if you're feeling unsafe, you have to make sure you're safe.
Oh, yeah. If you're unsafe, absolutely. Hang up and call 911.
Wait. This is also... I hope your audience is finding this helpful, because this is going very far. We're doing a lot of things here. Safety is an interesting conversation. And I'm saying this also to therapists. It's not always easy to assess safety. Sometimes you overestimate the danger. Like, you think it's very dangerous and you're very, very stirred up and you're surging with anxiety, and really it's not that dangerous. And sometimes you're in denial about how dangerous it is, and you make bad mistakes. I really look, I don't think everybody going through divorce should be in therapy, but I think a large number of people going through divorce should be in therapy, because things like assessing danger and having your own equilibrium in the face of feeling a threat, even if it's a mild verbal threat, that's a valuable thing to kind of get a handle on in therapy.
Right. It's like kind of like safety is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, but
because it's a failing. Yeah. But if you come to someone, let's say someone comes to me and they tell me that they're unsafe, I can't deal with it anymore. If they come to you, you could assess it because you have that background. But a lot of times it's the way you say it over, and then we're making each other, like, you say something to me, if I'm going to have to respond, and then it's going to come back, right? So let's move over to, I just want to talk about best interest of the child, what it is. If who gets to have custody, legal custody, physical custody. And in New York, it's based on best interest of the child. Now, best interest of the child, if you look on the court website, it says that there is no definition that they're going to give you for best interest of the child. In New York, generally, it means what's the safety and well-being for the child. Mm-hmm. What I like to tell people always is, as much as there's this ambiguity, which I don't know why they have to write it that way per se, but the court website has a parenting course on it, has the Bill of Rights on it. But what would you say, as someone that was a forensic analysis for children, wrote all these books on it, what would you say is best interest of the child? And if you want to win your custody case, to follow best interest of the child, or better yet, to have joint custody, to make it the ideal. So I'm happy with both parents winning, right? That I think is a win-win, have two parents involved.
Right.
What is best interest? How you define it? What would you tell people?
Well, I think this is a long-standing issue in the courts. In the 19th century, fathers would get custody because we lived in a patriarchal society. In the mid-20th century, until relatively recently, mothers were considered, better parents and would get custody. Solnit was an important professor of psychiatry at Yale. He wrote the book In the Best Interest of the Child, and he was one who pushed that, which is not about a mother being better or a father being better. It's about what's going to work for a child. And I think, unfortunately, there's no easy peasy answer for that. The ideal would be joint custody and a binuclear family. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Joint custody, binuclear family, where there's love. And it's just a divorce. It's only a divorce. We've got a whole life to live. It's not even a blemish. It didn't work out. You're even teaching your children that if things don't work out, it's okay. You don't have to feel trapped in life. It's not the worst thing. Some people, by the way, come out of divorce enabled in their life not to tolerate things that are not working out. And some people grow up in marriages that are very bad, but the parents are unable to leave it. And they're getting educated by proxy that they can't leave something once they're in something bad. So divorce done properly, the best interest of the child, in my opinion, binuclear family, joint custody. Now, if you're going to have sole custody, either for legal or medical purposes, or sole custody, or basically sole custody in terms of operationally where the kid's going to live, that has to do with like evaluating the situation and what it's all about.
When you say joint custody, you mean as in time, or you mean working together, all decisions?
All decisions working together is joint custody.
And as time, you're more flexible, or are you like on one of those? You know, there are people that are on the 50-50 train,
I'm
or
on
people
any
that are
I'm on
not.
any train. I can the only thing that is important to me is the child and what's going to work. You know, sometimes the father is working crazy hours and doesn't have the time. He has to get nannies to take care of the kid. It's not going to work. You know, or his mother's going to take care of the kid. It's just not as good as the mother being there. Or the mother's working crazy hours, doesn't have the time. There's many ways that this gets worked out, but it has to be, there's stability, there's Big Ben, like I said, there's structure, there's love, there's an ability to work things through.
And joint legal custody, I think like a lot of times it's maybe one parent is more involved than the other, but at the end of the day, if they're able to sit by a table and work it out together,
It
you
happens all
could
the time.
parent together. Now, the time, that's going to depend on your schedule.
It depends on the schedule and, you know, and your inclinations and your inclinations. But the joint legal is really important. Once again, it's like Big Ben. Your kid knows without even hearing about it that you're making decisions together. If the kid needs to have asthma medication, you both agree on it. If the kid, God forbid, needs, you know, I don't know, stimulant medication for ADD, we do this all the time. Both parents buy into it. If the father and mother is concerned about it, they make their own appointment with the psychiatrist and get the lowdown about the medicine, decide if they want to do it. The child knows that the parents are in it together. This is the binuclear family. I think it's a brilliant idea. Constance Ahrens, you should look her up. A brilliant idea. What she did is she interviewed adult children of divorce many years out, people who were adults now reflecting back on the divorce when they were kids, and she was asking them what really worked and what really didn't work. And that's where she came up with the idea of the binuclear family.
Right.
Now, sole custody happens when one parent really is deficient and really can't handle things. Either they make bad decisions, or they have a bad medical problem, or they have an addiction, or they're just unreliable. One parent is really superior. And the court will make that decision. And sometimes that person who really is in trouble will acquiesce and understand that they just can't do it. The problem you're going to have is when one person is a very competent parent and one person is a mediocre competent parent. And he or she's going to get upset with this one over here. And he or she's going to lose because a mediocre parent is still their parent. And a mediocre parent is still entitled to have everything in terms of parenting that they should have. And God willing, that person gets into therapy and can do better for their children. Amen.
Right. Okay. We actually, I put out a few videos of children, adolescents speaking about their childhood going through divorce. It's called Divorce Untethered.
Yes.
But let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts that you have that you want to share? I know we covered so much.
I'm honored to be here, Isaac. I think that, you know, it's so lovely that you put this together. I hope that your audience found it useful. There are basic concepts that I shared that are really quite simple, a little harder to execute, but once you get into it, it's like a muscle. You get used to it. The intergenerational boundary, protecting the innocence of your children, understanding regression, learning how to regulate yourself and regulate the situation, the binuclear family. These are all basic good concepts that from that space you can give your kids much better. And if anyone would like to learn more about my work, I have been writing for Psychology Today for many years. You can look up Mark Banschick, MD, Psychology Today. You'll get a lot of material. I've written 150 articles. They're all for free. And if you want to get in touch with me, You can contact me through Psychology Today. They have an email. It will go directly to me. If you want to buy my books, it's right there on Psychology Today.
Thank you so, so much for doing this. And I hope that we have um, more things in the future, maybe an event or something like that,
Hmm.
to really bring all this knowledge that you have about how to
Hmm.
raise children. This is years in the making, and
Yes.
from the book till now, that's a long time seeing how all that plays out. And
Yes.
I think in a way this book was before its time, but now I think that we see it more than ever, like how much all these rules, principles, ideas really are playing out. I know you have in the back of the book, you have a parenting agreement. Like,
Hmm.
how are we going to be acting?
Hmm.
Not to say a legal thing, but
Hmm.
if you both put yourself out there to
Hmm.
say, okay, let's sign this agreement, just saying we are going to follow this for the betterment of our child is so powerful. So I hope we have more things in the future. So follow us, follow Mark on social media. We'll post about it if we make anything, and I hope that we do. And this podcast is going to come out. Um, not it's not going to be tomorrow. So hopefully by the time that it comes out, we'll already figure something out. How to actually set up such an event. And just thank you
I'm
so
open to doing
much.
some events, but I do suggest people go into Psychology Today. I think they can learn a lot there's a lot of free information from what I've written and other people have written, and I also do want to end with when you go through divorce, you can feel very alone. Your friends feel weird talking to you. Your parents may be a little disappointed. You're feeling some grief. You're worried about your kids. And there are too many predators, and it's not that the matrimonial attorneys are really predators, but they can't help themselves. They make a living in conflict, and parents are sometimes overwhelmed by their own emotions, which almost become predators on themselves without realizing it. And if you get a sense of my personality, it's like I'm kind of approaching this from a loving place. It's like I know you're in trouble. And you don't have a lot of places that are just like holding you and saying it's going to be okay, but we got to do it this way if it's going to be okay. So I think that's really my approach, and I hope we lifted some people today.
Thank you so much. And I'll leave you off with this blessing that it's a traditional blessing. And I leave this to my clients. So anyone that's listening that has children as well, it's the blessing of nachas, which means you should have pride and joy from your children. And I really hope that everyone going through divorce really should look for pride and joy from their children, because that's something you both gain from.
Amen.
Thank you.
See you soon.